Hello and welcome to the Venus Flytrap podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stephen Paul Edwards, and this is where we talk about toxic relationships. Why do we have them? If we're in them, how do we get out of them? Right? And how do we not go back into them again? Right? So, first of all, these toxic relationships are patterns. They're showing you patterns that you have created, usually in your childhood, patterns of behavior, patterns of beliefs, and then they repeat in all areas of your life. So, look, everything is a relationship. The relationship with your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your partner, your significant other, whatever you want to call that. But it doesn't end there. Everything is a relationship. You have a relationship with money. Some people say, why can I never make money? Because of the patterns that you created in your childhood, usually in your childhood, not always, but usually. And then they are reflected in your life throughout your life until when? Until you take a look at yourself, until you take a look at those patterns, until you take a look at your childhood. And then once you start to recognize that these toxic relationships, whether it's money, whether it's your spouse, whether it's your career, whether it's your friends, whether it's your coworkers, or of course your family, that's a juicy one, isn't it? They're happening because of these patterns that were created long ago that you're not aware of. And these beliefs that you've created were passed down to you, were created for you by your friends, by your parents, usually your caretakers, by your social situation, your ethnicity, your religion, all these things, your teachers at school, all these things create beliefs that you're not even aware of now. We call them transparent beliefs. You can't even see them. You're not even aware of them. That's why it's so difficult to work on yourself. So these beliefs, these patterns of behaviors are repeating themselves over and over again until you deal with them. And I always say to people, listen, prevention is much better than cure. Prevention before the cure. So the sooner you start looking at these things, heal these, what you might call wounds from these traumas that happened in your childhood and your early formative years, the sooner you can have a healthy relationship. Because if you bring this baggage into a relationship, how can you possibly have a healthy relationship? Because you're not healthy, right? So we're going to look about how we can get you where you need to be to attract the person that you want to share your life with. Because until you have that vibration, that frequency, it's not going to happen. You've heard it before. You've got to be the person you want to attract in order to attract them. That frequency, that vibration has to be within you first. Okay, so what I can guarantee you is this. When you come here, you come to these podcasts, they are going to be entertaining. We're going to have fun. I'm going to laugh at myself, and I'm probably going to laugh at you. Get over it, right? They're going to be entertaining. They're going to be enlightening. You're going to learn things you did not know before that are going to change the way you think. And if we can change the way you think, it's going to change the words you use. If we can change the words you use, we can change your actions and behavior. And that's the secret to transformation. Okay, thoughts, words, or deeds. Those are the three keys that we've got to work on to get where you want to be, to have the life, relationships, the finances that you truly deserve. So let's get started.
A tailored suit in a London rain. He built an empire to mask the pain. A self-made man with a heart and heart, watching the world from a place apart. Then she walked in like a sudden blade in the midnight heat where the shadows played. A fallen heiress with a rebel soul, ready to take back all control. She lived by no rules but her own desire, wrapping his life in a ring of fire. An international ghost of a golden age, stepping back onto the center stage. Oh, the Venus.
Okay, so we're going to get into, we've got some posts coming out for social media, and I wanted to go over some of those posts and maybe go in a little bit deeper about toxic relationships. So these are for those of you who may be in a toxic relationship. Now, there's no actual diagnosis called you're in a toxic relationship, right? This is just a name we call relationships that may be not good for you and have certain characteristics. We'll go into later what really constitutes that. This is also going to help people who don't want to get in a toxic relationship, right? And some things to look for. So some people don't break your heart immediately. They slowly convince you to abandon yours first. And that's kind of what happened in this situation with me and Tomoz. I'm sure you're all familiar with Tomoz, right? And so little by slow, I started to give myself away, give the things that had made me who I am away without realizing it, thinking, I cannot do that for a while. Things like not working out, not meditating, not doing my daily juice, and not doing the things that gave me a strong foundation to be who I am in the world. And you don't realize that right away because it happens little by slow. And little by slow, you start to lose yourself. And what does that mean? It means everything that you do becomes about them, right? And they become, like Tomoz did, your magnificent obsession. Maybe not so magnificent. Tomoz was magnificent. But anyway, your person may not be so magnificent. I'm messing with you, right? So they become the center of your life. Everything you do evolves around them. That's not healthy, right? You've got to keep your own space, your own friends, your own life within the confines of a life with a person that you're in a relationship with. To do otherwise is unhealthy. And you don't necessarily realize when they say, oh, don't go work out today. You have to meditate. Why can't we just be together? Why can't we just go for a walk together? Why can't we go sit by the pool? Why can't we go in the pool? Why do you have to do that right now? I really wanted to spend some time with you. So they make you feel important. And in doing so, playing on your ego, right? And in doing so, they get you to not do what you really want to do. That's one of the first things to look for is if you're giving yourself away. So the next thing then is red flags, right? Red flags rarely look dangerous in the beginning, but sometimes they look like chemistry, right? So very often in a toxic relationship, the beginning is amazing. They're perfect. You're saying to God, oh, thank you, God, for sending me this person. They're amazing. I am so fortunate for a while. And then the next thing you start realizing, well, maybe they're not so perfect, They just did that and that was kind of mean, or they did the other and that was kind of disrespectful. But you override it. You overlook it because they've already got, in the Venus flytrap, the Venus flytrap has a nectar that causes the fly to get disorientated and lose its mind. And that was happening to me. I wanted more nectar and less reasons not to be with her, right? So then what starts to come is chemistry. It's not chemistry, really, when you are drawn to someone to such a degree that you think they're your soulmate in the first 3 days. That might be an exaggeration, but you know what I mean? It just goes too quickly. It doesn't make any sense, but you think and you make excuses for it by saying things like, they're my soulmate. I've never met anybody like this before. I know he or she is the one. No, you don't, right? You don't know that yet, right? There's a long way to go before you can say that. There's an awful lot of things you've got to do before you get into a relationship that you're intending to spend the rest of your life with that person. You got to figure out your rules, your values, your likes, your dislikes, your likes, your dislikes. All those are critical because you want to at least be aligned in some of those things. It doesn't have to be in everything, but the important things, right? You need to be aligned in. Maybe you have a strong religious belief. And if they're completely opposite, if you're a deep, devout Christian and they are a Muslim, you might have some challenges there, right? Unless you're able to integrate those two things and respect those two things about each other. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it's going to make it more difficult. That's all. But you need to be aware of those things. You need to really be conscious of what you're getting into, even though initially they might seem like they can do no wrong and everything is going to be perfect. You got to wait, right? You got to be realistic. You got to be sensible. You got to be a little bit more cautious than jumping in and saying we're going to get married next week. Usually doesn't work out too well. Just saying. All right. So things that tend to go very quickly. And then the red flags have been shown up since the beginning, right? I tell people, look, people tell you who they are within the first few minutes of you meeting them. So let me give you an example. So I think I mentioned before, I met Tomoz on a website, right? A dating website. Pretty common, right? Anyway, this was an international dating site. Why am I telling you that? Because when I found her, I found her like she was missing, right? But I found her uh, uh, pictures and her section of the site. Turns out, very often you have to get on an airplane, go meet these people because they live so far away, and sometimes into different countries. She lived like 30 miles down the road. What are the chances, right? What have I said? No coincidences, right? So it made it more practical to date because we were closer. So anyway, I see her pictures on the website, and it was pretty obvious right out the gate. I mean, she doesn't say that she's a model, but it's pretty obvious, right? Beautiful pictures. There's even a reel on there of doing a commercial. She'd been in some movies and other things. Anyway, anyway, the point is she was beautiful, right? And it was obvious that she was from money because of the other pictures there, right? She'd lived in Miami. She lived in Brazil. She lived in Los Angeles. And there were pictures of her doing equestrian horse riding. So there was some indications there that she might be a blue blood, right? That she might come from wealth. Anyway, I'm thinking, I don't know, there's probably no chance here for me, right? But I'll give it a shot, right? So I start texting her, right? And my texts were like, 4 paragraphs long, and her responses like 3 days later were like 3 words or a sentence, right? So things were going really well. Anyway, my friend Jerry, who's a big part of the book, I showed him, I said, look, what do you think about this text? He laughed his ass off. He goes, man, she probably stopped reading up to the first 3 lines. I don't know what you're thinking. That's just crazy. Anyway, finally, I got her to agree to go for a coffee with me. Yeah, I know. Coffee. Pretty pathetic, right? Anyway, so she agrees to go to a coffee with me one day, and I'm like, yes, right? The next day she canceled. I'm like, no. Right? So now I got to figure out another way to get her on a date. Well, one of the pictures she had of her, right, what would you call it? Her own website, right? On the website, is her standing in front of a wall in a museum, standing in front of a wall of antique typewriters. Like I said, she's 5'11" in her bare feet. She's never in her bare feet. She wears heels. She wears heels to bed. So she's usually wearing 5 or 6 inch heels. So she's like 6'5", 6'4", depending on the day. And so she's pretending to reach up onto one of the typewriters and type, right? So I tried a bunch of things, got nowhere. So finally, I just said, I got to go on a limb here and I got to try something a little different. I'll use a little bit of humor, right? So I said, hey, listen, I'm looking for an assistant and I need a high-handed typist. Do you know anybody? So she came back, me, right? And I said, okay, you're a little bit over anxious, aren't you? Or something like that. I said, well, why don't we have an interview over dinner? She knew what I was doing, right? But she said, okay. So we set a dinner date. At this point that I'm thinking, I can't let her cancel again, right? So I told her I'd gone to these extreme lengths on the first date, which if you read the book, it was unbelievable what the things I did, especially when you consider it was a first date. But anyway, I figured I'm going to really get this tied down. So I figured I'll buy her some flowers. I'll let her know I'm going to buy some flowers. You can't cancel with a guy when he's going to buy you flowers, right? I hoped. Anyway, so I texted her and I said, hey, what's your favorite flower? And she came back and she said, bird of paradise. So I was joking with her, right? I go, nuh-uh. Me too. It's a bit expensive though. So what's your second favorite? Right? I mean, who says that, right? She came back instantly. Venus flytrap. She named herself and she named the book. She told me who she was right at the get-go. And what are the chances I'd find that out? How many people ask a woman what your second favorite flower is, right? It's just having a joke. And there it came out right at the beginning. And my intuition, yes, we all have intuition. We just don't always listen to it. No, not me. I always listen to it, right? So my intuition said, ominous, probably dangerous. So as I said, true to my word, I listened to my intuition and said, I kind of like dangerous, right? So I said, okay. I just overlooked it, right? I was already in, right? I was already hooked. So we go on this date, which is kind of miraculous, right? It's unbelievable. Everything went perfectly, which very often happens when you get into a toxic relationship, which just fuels the fire, right? It fuels the let's get going. We're in. It's already done. We're getting married next week. Well, we didn't go that we didn't go that far, but it was pretty intense, right? And like I said, that's very often a sign of a toxic relationship. But the point is, red flags were coming left and right. That was the first one that I didn't listen to. And before too long, I just stopped even paying attention because there were so many. And again, that's another danger when you're in a toxic relationship. Now, let's just be clear here. I said this before and I'm going to say it again. Toxic relationships can be the best thing that ever happened in your life. I know it doesn't feel like it at the time. And for some of you, it doesn't feel like that right now. And some of you are thinking, this guy's lost his mind. Well, as I already told you, when I was very young, I lost my mind then, and I've never really got it back. So, and I have to get with you and talk about when I said all these things that happened to me happened for me, but felt like happened to me when I was a kid. I was in a mental asylum at 16, got humiliated for wearing clothes that were too big for me, got humiliated because everybody decided I had a small dick. Well, not everybody, but the guys in the showers, and then everybody in the school knew about it, and that was the end of that. Very traumatic. But every one of those things ended up paying major dividends in my life and being a blessing. Yeah, hard to believe, but I'll get to that. For right now, we've got to look out for the red flags and pay attention. Now, to a certain extent, I did pay attention. But what happened is I justified them or put them to one side. How come? Well, I'm dating a 5'11" former international supermodel who is a sex addict, and I have a mansion with a sex room. I don't know. What do you think I'm going to do? Right? I'm going to justify staying with her, right? And I knew that it was going to be challenging because in the very first few weeks, she almost stole my home, my cars, my belongings, and everything I had and left me with nothing. So, how do you justify that? And I spoke to her father that told me, he said to me, is she in your house right now? Well, she was hiding. I didn't know where she was, but I wasn't going to tell him that. So I said, yeah. He said, well, get her out and never let her back in again. If you do, you're a fool. So I can absolutely categorically say I'm a fool. But the point is, I was already hooked, right? And I had a powerful justification. Sexual energy is very powerful. Sure, none of you know that, but it is, right? And also, she was super smart. She was very intelligent. Her father's a genius, right? And she got a lot of those genes from him. So we used to spend like 3 days at a time in the sex room. Hi, listen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're here to make a public service announcement. If you're enjoying this conversation, which I know you are, right? Because if you say no, you probably lie about other things too, right? So if you're enjoying this, which I really do hope that you are, please take a moment to follow or hit the subscribe button and the like button so you never miss an episode. Let's get back to the conversation. Now, hold on a second, Stephen. No man can go for 3 days. Yes, they can, if they have a small dick. My point is, what happened because I had supposedly, let's just say it's still up for some detective work, but I had a small dick, and that's what I believed, right? So I had to overcompensate in the bedroom. I became an overachiever, right? So my number one priority and my number one erogenous zone of the things that turns me on the most is giving pleasure, right? Because then I feel like I overcame the problem. So there's a lot of other things you can do for a woman without having, penile. What am I looking for? Penetration, penile penetration, PP, right? It's your PP. So anyway, you got fingers, you've got a tongue, there are toys, and she loved all those things, right? So, and it was difficult for me to get pleasure beyond enjoying the pleasure of giving pleasure. So what am I talking about? It's difficult for me to get to the point of ejaculation, right? So I can spend days, right? And even then, after that, the longer I went on, the harder it was for me to come, right? Great. So I could spend 3 days in the sex room and have a blast. In fact, in the end, she'd be like, I got to take a break. I said, I just can't do it anymore, right? So then, now that wouldn't be 3 days straight. We'd have sessions for maybe 2, 3, 4 hours. Then we would take a break, and then we would go out by the pool and we would play backgammon. And we both love backgammon, right? And so we'd play it for hours and we would talk. Now, in the book, it explains that we did do a few drugs, right? So we took amphetamines to keep us awake, which also stimulated us sexually and allowed us to stay awake for 3 days, which was way too long, right? And you start out feeling fantastic. You're talking your ass off and you can't stop talking. And in the end, you start getting really tired and then you get less patience and less talkative and all your energy is gone. But anyway, so we used to play backgammon on an outside sofa by the pool with a fire pit. It was beautiful, especially in the early hours of the morning, right? And we would just talk. And she was so bright, so interesting because she had a lot of interesting points of view, which we get into in the book a little bit. Some of which I didn't agree with, but she helped me understand, right, why she had that point of view, which wasn't easy to do. So relationships don't start with pain. Sometimes they're simply wounded enough to destroy everyone around them, right? And so she had that pattern. So I mentioned to you in the last podcast that I was in a mental asylum when I was 16, maybe 17. Anyway, I don't know the exact date, but I was in a mental asylum. Well, guess what? What? I asked you to guess. All right, you're not going to do that. Okay, so she was in a mental asylum around the time she was 16 as well. Nuh-uh. Uh-huh. Yeah, seriously. So what happened for her was, um, her father is obviously a genius, right? And very unemotional. Let's just say that, like a professor, or sorry, professor, so like a scientist or an engineer. All right, let's just say he was very analytical. Okay, can we leave it at that? So anyway, he didn't show really any love to Tomoz in a way she could feel it. Let's just say that, right? So, number one, she didn't feel loved by her father anyway. Then, um, he puts her in an asylum, and he never told me why. He told me he did, right? And she told me he did as well. Um, but it's not like, and he said she did some really terrible things when she was young, but it's not like I'm going to say to him, well, what were they? What did she do? Right? It's a freaking father, right? And you can never get a word of truth from her either. So, not a word of truth from her either, but a word of truth from her. So, anyway. So I had to kind of make it up in my head. I don't know what she did, but she did something enough to get her an asylum, and the father could have got her out, but he didn't. So she couldn't get out. So now, to compound the belief that she wasn't loved by her father, all these things are happening, right? And so her belief was compounded by that. And so in her head, it's like, well, if my father doesn't love me, how am I ever going to, how's a man ever going to love me if he doesn't, right? And so it compounded her anger towards him. So it turned into hate. And so she hated men because she grows up this incredibly beautiful young woman, and her belief becomes, they can't love me because I'm not lovable. So they just must want me because I'm beautiful and have sex with me. And so that was the reality she created. So from that, she decided, because she knew she was very intelligent, right? She ended up getting out of that asylum on her own. She convinced a boyfriend to dress up as a doctor to get her out. That's how manipulative she could be and how powerful she is, right? So anyway, she knew she was smart, and she also knew that she had this power of this beauty that she could pretty much get a man to do whatever the hell she wanted to, right? So she decided that she was going to use her beauty and use her intelligence to take money from men, not sexually, but con them out of it, right? To prove to herself and to her father that she could make it on her own. I know it's screwed up, but this is the bottom line. This is the truth, right? So her intention was always to meet wealthy men, take everything they have, and move on. Now, I didn't know that at the beginning, obviously, right? I mean, that's the last thing you'd be thinking of. Her father's a billionaire. Why would she need money? Because she was too stubborn to take money from the man that put her in asylum, that didn't love her, right? So she was like, I don't want anything to do with him. I had no idea about this, right? So the point is, you've got to get to know somebody, right? You got to get to know their background, who they are. Now, she'd given me her father's phone number when we first met. A very strange thing to do, right? But that made me think, well, I'll give you my parents' phone number, right? Not a good idea. But anyway, these are the things that can happen when you go too fast. And sometimes when you go too fast, it's almost like there's no going back. You've got so far in so quickly. It's very difficult because you become so entwined. It's very difficult to extrapolate yourself, right? So Let's take a look here. The most dangerous people aren't always cruel. Sometimes they are simply wounded enough to destroy everyone around them. Yeah, you know, it's not really they're being cruel, it's that they feel like they're not enough from their experience. And this gets into deep psychological issues, which we'll get into later, that she had that I didn't know about, whereby she wanted to, she knew that eventually people were going to find out who she really is. What do I mean by that? So these challenges, these mental challenges made her feel like she couldn't be herself because no one's going to love her, right? Remember? So she had to create these identities that she believed people were going to like. She had to become the person she thought other people wanted them to be, which you can do for so long, but eventually people see behind the facade. And she knew, or in her mind, her belief was that as soon as they see behind this facade, they're not going to want me around anymore. And so no one is going to stay around me. And that creates an intense fear of abandonment. So she was in terror of being abandoned. Now, this is part of the psychological problems as well, right? So she had this terrible issue with being abandoned. So she would very often destroy the relationship before she could be abandoned. I know. This is how we are, though, as people, that you don't know who you're getting involved with sometimes until it's too late. So this is why I say, look, they say to people, well, I had this this toxic woman came into my life, right? Or this toxic guy. Oh, really? Okay. Let's think about this for a second. So they're toxic and you drew them into your life. So they're a mirror of you. So who's toxic? Both of you, right? We draw into our lives, both of us, what we need to heal within ourselves. So that's why I say to people, listen, prevention is much better than cure. To actually go to therapy, go and have someone counsel you on the patterns that you've created since your childhood, get you to see how they have played out in your life, help you heal those so you don't keep repeating it. So when you go into a relationship, you're going to attract somebody who's also healed. That's how it works. So that's why people say when you want to get into a relationship, you got to be who you want. You got to be who you want the other person to be first. No. Uh-huh. Yeah, because that all happens deep down. People call it a spiritual level. You can call it a spiritual level. You can call it what you want, but it's going to be a vibration. So in essence, we are vibrating light, right? We're not humans having a spiritual experience. We're spirits having a human experience. And in our essence of who we really are, we are light vibrating, right? That's the simplistic term of it. And so when we're in that our essence, we're perfect. We're enlightened. All of us. So nobody is any more or less enlightened than you in their essence. But to come into this lifetime, to have experiences, we have to forget all that. Because if you remembered it, you couldn't have the experience, right? Think about it, but not for too long because you could get stuck, right? That's the bottom line. So now, during your life, you are going to, how does everybody have perfect experiences? How come there's no coincidences? Because it's all perfect. We're drawing into our life everything, everybody we need to remember who we really are on the physical plane. And that's called the right. Now, some of us have got a long way to go. Me too, right? So although I went through this experience and I had unbelievable, profound lessons when I saw everything as a mirror, not as somebody or she did this to me. She did it for me. And I started to talk about that in the last podcast. So if you haven't seen that, go back. So what happened is I drew her into my life so I could see mirrors of myself, pieces of myself that I left along the way, right? So I could recapture them, parts of myself that I'd always been too afraid to step into because I didn't have high enough self-esteem, right? Pieces of myself that I'd given away because I didn't want to go for that particular person because I was terrified I'd be abandoned. Sound familiar, anybody? So the Essenes, going way back when, right? This is about the time Jesus was supposedly alive. The Essenes were a group of people very enlightened, and they wrote a series of books. Some people, they wrote part of the Nagamati library. Anyway, these gospels or books that they wrote had profound truths in them, and they got lost, right? As you do, lose books, right? So anyway, one of the things they talk about the Essenes was that we, the human race, built into the consciousness of human race, we all faced with three, what they call the three universal fears that we all have to go through to get to remember who we really are. And those three universal fears are number one, self-esteem. And they talk about it in terms that, we have this inherent belief in our consciousness that our creator left us here alone, right? So that's abandonment. Second one is self-esteem, right? That we don't, in some way, because of that, we don't feel worthy, right? And the third one is trust, right? Trusting in ourselves is what it really comes down to. So we're all experiencing these trust issues, these abandonment issues, and these self-esteem issues. Can you relate? I know you can. If you can't, you're not paying attention, right? So these three things are happening, not to us, but what? For us. What do you mean for us? Because we have to go through resistance to create resilience. If you want to build a muscle, what do you have to do? You have to go in the you have to go in the gym, right? And weights or some kind of resistance to build muscles, to build strength. And we need resilience to get through the challenges in our lives. If there are no challenges, we can't build resistance. I know, it's all connected. So anyway, I'll tell you a quick little story that will help appreciate this. And it's an old story, but it's a good story. And there's a man sitting in his back garden. It's a beautiful spring day, sun shining, and he's looking around and he sees in the bushes a cocoon, caterpillar's cocoon, and the caterpillar's trying to get out, and it's starting to come out of the cocoon, and it's got this little slit, and it's trying to push its way through, and it can't get out. So the guy decides to help the butterfly, and he gets a little razor and he slices the cocoon so the slit is wider and the butterfly can get out. Well, the butterfly gets out, but it's not formed, it's deformed. And it kind of moves around for a few minutes and then it dies. You see, the slit was so small that the caterpillar had to push its way through it. And as it pushed its way through that slit, it would push all of the blood out into the wings of the butterfly so it could fly. But because the butterfly didn't have to go through that resistance to push through that, it was deformed. And so that applies to us. We've got to push through the slit of life. We've got to push through the resistance. We've got to go through the pain. Isn't giving birth painful? Well, it might not have been for you being born, but it was painful for your mom, right? And that pain is part of the experience, right? That pain is part of the bonding between mother and child, right? Not the only thing, but it's part of it, right? So that's life teaching us right from the beginning. The pain is teaching us things, right? It's teaching us, it's bonding us, it's making us stronger, more resilient, right? If we see it not as happening to us, but what? Happening for us, right? So we need resilience. We need the tough times with the bad. You got to take the rough. You've all heard this, right? You got to take the rough with the smooth. But instead of thinking it's happening to you, if you start to think, well, it's actually happening for me, it's making me stronger. I mean, how many of you can think of a time in your life where something happened and you went, this is the worst day of my life? Probably like me more than once, right? But when you look back at it later, you go, oh, I don't ever want to go through that again. It was awful. But having been through that experience, it's given me so many gifts in my life now. I wouldn't want to go through it again, but I'm glad I did. If not, again, get out more often, right? So these things happen in our lives. So they're not a bad thing per se. They're a gift. And so these are just some of the things. We just got through like 3 questions here, 3 notes. We got about 40 to go. But we got a lot more to get into about toxic relationships. In the meantime, I'm going to give you a little break, right? Because I know your head is fried and you need a break. So I'm going to tell you about something here and I'm going to read something to you. So during the course, I told you last time we were talking, or maybe I was talking, right? Last time I was talking, I was telling you about how I had these mental breakdowns, right? Or supposedly mental breakdowns where I went into mania, right? Got high as a kite, right? Without taking any drugs. And as a result of having these experiences, I got really, really high. Well, as it turned out, because I got really, really high, I started to have some very powerful spiritual breakthroughs. I kid you not, right? To where I actually was enlightened or it was pretty close. And you go, well, we were enlightened. What happened? Why did you stop being enlightened? Well, because I wanted to. Right? No, just kidding. So the reason is we are on a wave. We're riding a wave, ladies and gentlemen. Reality is a wave, just like vibration is a wave, right? And so things come in and out. What do you mean by that? Well, one day you could wake up really happy, and the next day you could wake up really sad. Is that true? You're the same person, but your emotions are on a wave. Well, so is your consciousness, right? One day you could be enlightened, and the next day you're not. Okay. All right. So let's get back to where I was. So this thing that I want to share with you, which I actually had to go and get from the other room. Anyway, I started to, in these high altitude states, these, what do we call it? Enlightened states. I was just freaking high. I started to feel like I was feeling God's presence. Well, how do you know it wasn't just your higher self? I'm telling you, I will let you know, right? There is a reason how and why I know it was God, the universe, higher power, whatever you want to call it. It was deep stuff, right? Now, I didn't stay in that state either, but I was in it for a while and I had some profound experiences. One of the things that happened for me was that I started to write, and I would write what I was hearing from this other voice from wherever it was. But I'll explain how this other voice came to be and how I know it was from probably the highest power I'm ever going to connect with anyway. Which you're not going to believe, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Anyway, the point is, when I was writing, the writing would break out into rhyme, rhythm and rhyme, right? And then the most profound things would come through these rhymes. Then I started to try and use it to create songs. So these lyrics are from a song that I wrote in that higher state, and it's called B. Now, I went a lot higher than this, and sometimes it gets really profound. But this is a little song that I kind of like, and I'm going to read it to you because I can't sing. And then we're going to end, okay? So this song is called B. Are you ready? We live alone together in a world of pleasure and pain. Each day brings a sunrise, a sunset, more sunshine and rain. Every experience is different, yet we are really all the same. We are apart in a sense, but we are remembering again. So hold my hand and let me know that you remember me. Do you want to live in a world of love, peace, and harmony? It's time to feel the rapture of being, to set our spirit free. It's time to start living to work and allow yourself to be. It may sound crazy. You might think that you have a lot to lose. So get out of your mind. Your reality is the one you chose. Just trust the feelings guiding you straight from your heart. The guidance has been there right from the start. So hold my hand and let me know that you remember me. Do you want to live in a world of love, peace, and harmony? It's time to feel the rapture of being, to set your spirit free. It's time to stop living to work and allow yourself to be. You know all the answers, so don't say that you don't know. Your intuition will guide you safely in the direction you wish to go. If we journey inside, we'll find true love, or we'll go without. We must remind each other that we are one until there is no doubt. So hold my hand and let me know that you remember me. Do you want to live in a world of love, peace, and harmony? It's time to feel the rapture of being, to set our spirit free. It's time to start living to work and allow yourself to be. I know, it's really good, right? Well, listen, I need a break. You need a break. So let's take a break. Just remember that if you want to get the first 3 chapters of the book for free, I know, good deal. You just need to click on the link below and you can read the first chapter. Why the first 3 chapters? Because once you've read the first 3 chapters, you're going to be hooked and buy the book. Huh. Genius. Then there's also a guide to the 7 signs that you're in a toxic relationship, a guidebook, again, complimentary. And then there is also an opportunity to spend 30 minutes with me. Can you imagine 30 minutes with me? Seeing if there's some areas of your life, maybe your relationships, or even your finances and your spiritual growth, whatever it is. We'll spend 30 minutes together, complimentary, so you can determine if there are some things that I might be able to help you with in a deeper way in your life. All right, so until next time, just remember, nothing happens to you. Everything happens for you.
Of a life lived fast, breaking the chains of a heavy past, from the erotic spirit to the soul's rebirth, finding what a human life is really worth. Sex, lies, and the repercussions stay as we dance the final act away. Just a true story of a love so deep, promises that we could never keep. In the garden of the trap we lay, waiting for the break of a brand